Ladies and gentlemen, in today's podcast relay, Dennis and I are talking to the man behind your most cherished musical memories. Over the course of 2 glorious hours, we talk a great deal about Jedi Knights, Sith Lords, jazz drumming, and corporate tyranny. The incredible, the fabulous, the amazing Mark Griskey.
All right, so welcome back to another episode of the podcast relay. And we have a special guest here today. We have Mr. Mark Griskey, who is a composer for a lot of video games that you might know. Did a lot of the Disney Interactive games of the late 2000s, as well as some of the LucasArts classics, such as Knights of the Old Republic 2 and The Force Unleashed, to name a couple.
Yes, a lot of your childhood favorites, your musical memories. The man behind them is indeed here. So, Mark, hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, and I'm excited, to speak with you guys. It's been just such a tumultuous year for a lot of people, including myself. So it's the strange thing is around, it's always been my goal to, like, later in life, give back and teach and do all this stuff. And I kind of feel like I want to become Obi-Wan now, So I'm just glad to have a chance to hear from you younger people who grew up on this music and grew up in a world where, a lot of these franchises were established. I grew up in a world where there wasn't an internet. So it's just fascinating that the stories are so compelling that they continue to engage.
They continue to
over
engage.
decades.
Yeah, and they do, and it's those stories that are sort of timeless in a way, mythological, and things like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that.
Yes.
So, but Star Wars has been there since 1977. I believe you were born in 1963. Is that correct?
This is correct. Yeah, and that year, 1977, was life changing. It was game changing for me because not only did Star Wars come out, Star Wars. I'm the oldest child of 3, and in a family, that's very, relatively conservative, let's say, and just the way things were back in the day. Star Wars was the first PG movie I was allowed to see.
Yeah, by
Can you
yourself.
believe that? It was like, it was just like, Disney was what we were raised on as children. And this is the world before, VCRs even, right?
Yes.
So by the time the original Star Wars movies came out, I saw A New Hope in the theaters.
Oh yes.
More than a dozen times.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, my dad was the same way.
Yep. So it was like, it was the same year that I discovered music. I grew up in this musical vacuum. Nobody in my family was a musician, in my immediate family. And I first instrument I played was actually trumpet in elementary school.
Is that so? Yeah, Dennis is also of the trumpet background. Yes.
Right.
I heard some of Dennis's music, and it's fantastic, by the way.
Thank you so much.
I listened to. Yeah. It's so. Anyway, I kind of failed at trumpet, without the proper, sort of understanding of what music's all about. Really, it's just strange that people don't understand playing a brass instrument. It's like there's 3 buttons on it. That doesn't mean you only have 3 notes. I literally had somebody tell me that he was like, yeah, I did this shoot. He was a cameraman that I worked for way back in the day. He said, I did this shoot the other day, and this guy I met who was in the marching band was a tuba major. That's so funny, man. How hard could it be? There's only 4 buttons, he said to me.
Oh, yeah.
The amount of people when I was in college that were still like, you only have 3 valves. How do you make all these different sounds? And I'm like, it's complicated. It's very complicated.
It seems very complicated to me, and I'm somebody who knows of music. I play guitar and bass and drums.
ocarina and piano myself, but I'm not exactly the composer type. I don't know how to read sheet or anything like that, but I do know how to like play music, at least by ear. So, but yeah, but Dennis is the one with the actual career plans and everything here. So, I'm not, and so you two have a lot more in common than I initially even imagined. This is shaping up to be a fairly interesting conversation. Let's talk a little bit about the Dennis. I think we might actually, given how we started out here, we might want to start with the just the sort of different questions. So we're curious, what were your parents' thoughts about you going into music, given that you had no musicians in the immediate family or anything like that?
Yeah, so on my father's side, there's a lot of PhDs,
Right,
and
right.
a lot of like true rocket scientists.
Right, okay.
My brother's a plasma physicist, right?
Right.
My father was one of the guys in charge of designing the stealth bomber. So
Oh, wow.
it was a very different kind of sort of upbringing. So like my father was honestly against me going to music at first for the right reasons.
Right.
As a caring parent, he didn't understand how the heck I could make a living.
Yeah.
In this thing that he doesn't know anything about.
Yeah.
And then, conversely, it also, he knew that I was smart with science and stuff. Strangely enough, I don't seem to have the math genius, kind of capabilities of my brother with the plasma physics degree. Math didn't really interest me so much, but I think music became math for me. It was like this strange thing where he saw how into it I was. So
Right.
So here's the story. My father, being into technology and everything, got the family a computer in the 1970s,
Right.
or maybe I guess it was more like the 80s at this point. An Atari 1040 ST was the first computer I owned, and it was pre-Macintosh, and I bought like a MIDI interface for it, and I started making music on it and played it for my dad. He came home from work today.
Wow.
I did this on the computer today. He was so impressed. He gave me that computer. He would, and then sort of blessed my career path, but said, at least get a degree. I want to make sure that you graduate with a degree. And it's so funny. I've taken so many college courses. I'm a lifelong learner. So I just love learning. So I've probably racked up 15 years of college at this point, but I only have one degree, a bachelor music degree in percussion performance, where I actually followed through and got it,
Yeah.
But that, as long as I achieved, my dad was behind it. My mom was always very creative. She grew up in Ireland in a place that didn't have running water or electricity until she moved to the United States, took the boat over and everything. So as an immigrant and everything, she went back to school here, and she's done wonderful things, but she's always been, Mark, follow your dream. Children, follow your dream. You can do whatever you want. So between the two of them, they were very nurturing with it. But it was a path I carved out by myself. I didn't know. Like every step of the way was a big question.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've been in the sort of digital arena with music from day one, almost essentially. So with the MIDI interface and whatnot. That's a very interesting backstory, actually. Often you hear this same story over and over again with many people who went into the creative field where their parents were against it because they can't conceive of a way where you could make money off of it, essentially. They think you're going to be some kind of an artist who's going to starve and suffer for their art out there in the cruel world.
I think Van Gogh comes to mind for a lot of people.
Van Gogh is essentially the sort of suffering artist archetype.
The stereotype.
Yeah, and he was, and Beethoven too, to an extent. He lived for at least toward the end of his life, he largely made music for himself at the end. That's at least my understanding of Beethoven. But it's a very common story for me. I'm more into the visual arts, the visual field, and my parents were actually very nurturing with that from day one. They always encouraged me to go, pursue that. Whatever I want to do, I should do, essentially. So my parents are your age, born in 1964, so they're in the late boomer, early Gen X crowd, where they're maybe a bit more open-minded about such things, creative stuff and things like that. But yeah, this isn't about us or isn't about me. This is about you. So let's move on with the questions, right?
Yeah.
Actually,
no, it's all good.
Dennis, go ahead.
Moving on from that, actually, what was your first, I'd say, big break in terms of getting into the music industry?
Yeah.
And
interesting. Yeah.
Would there be anything that you would do differently looking back on it?
I'll answer the second part first. No, I wouldn't do anything differently. I mean, like, my approach to breaking in was just, it was the only thing worth like investing my time and energy into. It was like all consuming. It was like this big giant question of, what is it? I need to understand music. And, because of the scientific background of my whole family, I became a huge music theory head. I figured if I learned all the rules, I would understand music. And it turns out you can learn all the rules, and that means nothing. You still have to have something to say, and you have to do something with it. Absolutely. But back to the first part, the breaking in. The main thing is you just gotta go out there and do it. So I came up with this idea myself of like how I wanted to structure, my life at a pretty young age, still in my teens and into my early 20s, is that I would prioritize music above everything else. And if I had to do something else to pay the bills, I would try to relate it to music, So if it's a skill set that relates to music itself, well, audio technology, and the fact that I come from this whole tech savvy family and everything, made it. I had a little recording studio with a 4-track reel-to-reel tape recorder and a Tascam Model 2 mixing board, and I would steal my sister's clarinet and improvise on it and record that, and then she'd get mad at me, and then I saved up money, and I got my first drum set. This is back to the 1977 story. 1977, I saved up money. I just started asking for cash for all my birthday and Christmas gifts and stuff. Smart. And I came up with half. Basically, I was halfway there at about $250 saved, right? And I wanted this $500. That was the price of a used drum set at the time, Ludwig drum set. And it was in the paper, in the recycler before the internet and everything. It was like a paper that people trade used stuff. And I pointed it out to them, and my parents said, well, son, it's, Christmas is coming up here, and you've saved enough money. We're going to pay the rest. And I was really surprised. They went out and they bought me a drum set. But breaking in is just that. It's like you prioritize your life so that if you're doing something outside of music to create income, what I started doing professionally, once I was older, was recording. I was a recording engineer, recording, like, for example, in college, everyone has to do a senior recital, and it needs to be recorded and archived, right? So, for me, like, I had to perform an hour's worth of solo percussion stuff for my senior recital in percussion. It depends on the program, the degree and everything, but got to go out and perform. So I had a little business, like, recording, and I invested in some really nice microphones, saved up my money, and a recordable DAT player machine, and then also a recordable CD at the time that they first came out with those machines where you record straight to CD. And then I would, duplicate tapes for them. Basically, you throw your whole life into music. So the actual real breakthrough, pre me, I guess, quote unquote, getting famous, like somebody would know my name. I was actually making some good money
licensing my music for production music, and so
yeah.
you're an anonymous person, in this position. But if your music gets placed and used, great. You get the income stream, but also now you can sort of use that credit. So by the time LucasArts was recruiting for a new composer to rule them all, one composer, all the guys left,
like
right?
the sort of in-house composer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what they restructured the company completely, and decided that we need a music guy, and we're really gonna vet this person. We're gonna search the world basically. And I saw a want ad on Gama Sutra looking for a staff composer position at LucasArts, and I'm thinking, well, I have these credits now. At the time, my music was being played for, if you remember, the original X-Files TV series.
Yes.
For the season finale. If you saw any trailers on Fox for the season finale of the original, my music was being used on all that. Right?
Oh, wow.
So,
I'm a huge fan of the X-Files. I've never seen any of the promotional stuff, but I did watch the episodes growing up, and I've rewatched ever since. That's fantastic. I had no idea.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the interesting thing about production music is so and how I got involved with those people was just playing in bands, man. It's like in Los Angeles at the time, there was a lot more live music opportunities than there is now. Unfortunately,
Right.
I think this is a global phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
But when I was in college, I worked a part-time job as a valet parker at this restaurant in Malibu, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I chose that, this is back to my priorities. If I have to do anything outside of music, I want it to be minimal commitment,
Oh, yeah.
flexible schedule, and pay the most amount of money for the time I'm doing. So if you get a job that pays tips or something like that,
That's the dream.
yeah, all you have to do is hustle and run and get cars for people. So I met Johnny Carson. I parked his car.
Wow.
Steven Spielberg, man, he was so nice to me. I met some of these people in person. He tipped me well, and but they did. And years later, Steven Spielberg apparently personally approved my music for the Minority Report trailer.
That's brilliant. You've done a lot of trailer music. I noticed you did for I believe that one of the Harry Potter movies. I believe.
Correct. Yeah.
Was it Phoenix or Half-Blood Prince? Which one was it?
I think it was Phoenix, I read.
Phoenix. Yeah.
Thank you.
I do. Yes. All right.
Lisa.
Yeah.
That whole connection back to the breaking in, there was a little boutique audio company here in Los Angeles called X-Ray Dog.
All right.
That catalog still exists in the BMG library. The BMG.
Yeah.
A lot of these big companies are sort of just grabbing everything because they see the value of the copyright.
Oh, yeah.
But when X-Ray Dog was nobody, it was just people like us working out of our garages. One of the founders was a friend of mine through a band that I played in. A guitar player that that played in one of my bands knew him, and then when he explained the situation, they're looking for this production music. Me and my friend figured out how to write it in our home studios and got some tracks together. And the first thing that ever licensed for me, my first big real check, was the Full Monty. If you remember that movie, that comedy movie.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yes.
I've heard of
it. So the trailer music was me and my buddy Chris Field. He went on to be a hugely successful trailer composer. But my buddy Chris, that's what he does. Is he did one video game and decided he didn't like it and just stayed in trailers his whole life. But he did the Lord of the Rings stuff. Mm-hmm. So all the trailers you saw. Yeah, Christopher Field. So that was kind of my break-in. But then again, I was still kind of nobody because your name isn't necessarily presented. Your music's out there, but you don't know. And then it was really this Lucas thing where here's the key. Your break-in moment is just that all the ducks are in a row. You've done your homework and you're good enough, but the big challenge is just showing the people, right?
Yes.
So when I first auditioned for LucasArts, I couldn't even present my music. It wasn't an audition like that. It's a very corporate sort of process. You know, they have to vet you out. So first you have to, send a application letter or something like that. That's, your whole bio and credits, and they have to look at it. And the big thing missing for me was interactive music. Now, I love video games. Myst for the Mac was the one that got me totally crazy. I got sucked in, and I solved that.
Yeah.
The original one I solved in a weekend, and it was like a weekend. Wow. It was 72-hour weekend. Me making notes and everything, right? And just like a lost weekend. And I go, who's doing this? Who is like? I looked at Hollywood, and so by this time I'm like assisting for other composers. Right. My music's getting placed, but I'm not a name. I'm nobody, right?
Yes.
When I saw this LucasArts thing, I went, if they could just hear my music, and if they could just talk to me, maybe I have a shot. And the hardest part was kind of putting the bio and the resume together just so they would do that. And then they flew me up there twice. It took them about 3 months to make a decision. And I was scratched off the list and then added back on, and I finally got the gig in the end. So that was really the thing that launched my career, was being recruited by LucasArts as their staff composer.
Wow, that's this is a really incredible story.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's this. You had this very methodological approach about going about like making it essentially in the industry.
Yeah. And
it sounds,
somehow it works.
Yeah, and it sounds like what you mentioned earlier about like going all in for the music, or going all in for the art, and just damn everything else. That sounds like a very millennial kind of headspace to me.
Exactly, man.
Because before, millennials are kind of a departure from the previous generations, boomers, Gen X, in that we are more of these idealistic people where it doesn't really matter how much money you're making. All that matters is that you get to do what you essentially want to do, right? You get to do your art. Yeah. So it sounds very millennial. So you were kind of a generation ahead, I suppose, in terms of your mentality.
Well, I'll take that compliment as it was meant, as a compliment, but it messes me up, dude. I was all into like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and then got bored with it.
Oh yeah, and
this last year it took off. I could be a billionaire.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now Elon Musk has dumped $1.5 billion into Bitcoin, and then Dogecoin is taking off like mad in wake of the Wall Street bets thing, and yeah, it's crazy. It's been absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point, I don't want to like splinter off into that, but I guess it's okay. like this notion, like you said, that I think like a millennial or something. I think that it actually is. I think you're onto something. I'm trying to figure out my own life. To be honest with you, my career hasn't been that great this last couple of years, and I think it's like I feel like I need to go through a renaissance and reinvent myself. And I'm going, you know what? I should connect with the younger generation, because I think they understand. I think we're thinking on the same plane. I'm not some old moldy guy. I'm thinking, I want to start all over, man. It has.
The world has absolutely changed. Like a lot of the things that you were talking about, like all the equipment that you had and stuff like that. We're in a whole different world where people can make these scores just from a MacBook.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And one of the things that
yeah, go ahead.
So go ahead.
No. I mean, there's so many different ways as a creative person now to earn a living through online means. You can create a YouTube channel, a Patreon, whatever. Just
stream on Twitch.
Stream on Twitch. Stream composition on Twitch. Whatever. Come up with novel ideas. So I don't think it's ever too late to reinvent yourself. I think it's this is the opportune time right here, right now. Yeah.
Because I believe so
too. We're in the midst of a huge change in the world, like even beyond the changes that have happened in the past 10 years. Everything's just getting turned on its head again. And I actually wanted to ask about like the business side of things, right? So that's always a struggle, especially for young composers to go, okay, I'm at a point where I can quit my day job. I'm at a point where now music is my thing, and the business side of it is always the biggest struggle, especially for young composers. What?
Yeah.
Not only that, but also like the sort of businessman and the artist are almost polar opposites. So it's very counterintuitive for somebody in the creative field to go into, but you have to do it, right? If you want to be successful, right? And this next question actually relates to that very topic. So go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, how did you deal with those struggles when you were breaking out with LucasArts and everything? Like, when did you know it was time to like quit the valet job and the music full time? Like, this is how I can support myself.
Yeah, I mean, certainly having a salaried, position, for a big company, and I'll be honest though, is they know that the credit is like this giant carrot that anybody would want, anyone would want. So the pay scale isn't really that great, for these. This is why I never.
You'll work for exposure, right?
It truly is. It truly is. And but what else are you going to do? But at least I know I got a steady paycheck coming in. I knew that like the trailer stuff was starting to take off. So when I got offered the job with Lucas, I mean, I was already a full-time musician, but that's when it had to ramp up. And this is, as a salaried employee, I didn't have to deal with the business stuff so much. I had my side business, and your accountant, if you're in the United States, you do a Schedule C is what they call it. And so the first thing I would say is I was lucky enough to find an accountant who was young and leaving, her company, and sort of take me on as a client. I met her, strangely enough, on this tour of Africa in 1989 when I was doing sound. Right when I graduated college, through my connections in the film industry and doing these other audio gigs, I was offered an audio gig. I made more money than I had ever made before in my life. It was $750 a week, I think, working in Africa for 2 or 3 weeks to record this artist, Passion Stabany. But I was just like, these weird things happening. You're like, but anyway, that's when I met my accountant. And my point was on that tour, I said, well, I'm making $750 a week this week, but I'm normally the struggling drummer who makes like, I don't know, $10,000 a year back in the 80s or whatever it was, playing little gigs and everything. But my wife, works in the restaurant industry, and she has a steady job. And then, the accountant explained to me, well, your losses can offset her income, and you can set up a business structure. Let's do a Schedule C. You just start to need, and it's really hard, man. It's like wearing 2 different hats. Like you said, I can get into the business stuff, but I have to change my brain. I have to, some days I can't do it at all. Other days I just do that, and then I can't do music at all. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's very counterintuitive for somebody who's creative to go into the business side of things, but you really just have to force it. You have to learn how to do business, how promotion works, stuff like this. So
I know like one person who's actually like a pro at both, and it's like he's a very rare type of person.
Oh yeah.
Like he started out as a musician and everything, and he was like, oh, this business stuff is confusing. Took like 2 months, and he was like, yeah, I'm good at this now. Like, it never happens.
Well, for me, as I'm going through this kind of reinvent myself, re-understand myself, building this new studio, I really want to like Mark Griskey 2.0.
Oh yeah.
I went back to college, and I'm working on I put it on hold with COVID right now, so I got to get back to them and see where we're at. But pretty close to finishing my master's degree in music business from the Berklee School of Music. That's brilliant. Their online version, and man, it's like I was lucky enough that once it started to happen for me. I hate to say it, and everyone's going to hate me who's trying to break in right now, but for a while I didn't have to do anything to promote myself. It was just, I was like, once your work is your own promotion. Conversely, there was, when I left Disney in 2015, I did it because I was contracted to do this enormous game for a Chinese company. And they had a huge budget, one of the biggest budgets I've ever worked with. We spent a whole week at Skywalker Sound with a symphony orchestra and choir and everything. And I left my Disney day job because quite frankly, couldn't, like if I did this one freelance job, it would be 2 years worth of Disney salary, right?
Oh wow.
and Disney didn't have a budget for me to record at Skywalker Center or anything. I was doing it all MIDI and everything.
Disney didn't have a budget. What?
Oh yeah,
really?
I know they never have a budget.
Doesn't want to give you the budget.
Yeah,
I know it's so silly because these companies have companies within companies. So like when I worked for Lucas, I wasn't working for Lucasfilms. I was working for Lucas Arts.
Yes,
and I wasn't working for ILM or I wasn't working for Skywalker Sound, right? And they've got a different pay scale and a different structure. It's the game division. And I don't know how many times in my life I've had some huge franchise, Star Wars, right. Disney,
Harry
Marvel.
Potter,
Yeah, we need your Harry Potter. I haven't worked, my music got used in it, so I actually got paid well for there. But other times they have no budget.
Right,
we'd love you to do this thing, and but darn, we don't have a budget this time. So anyway, I lost my train of thought of what I was trying to.
So about that Chinese game we were talking about, the one with the huge budget.
So it never got released. It was canceled after we recorded.
No, that's awful. That's absolutely terrible.
So my career just like at that point, so I had been working for Disney and was on staff there, and even though I was still freelancing,
yes,
I was doing it part-time, for a few years. And then you do this huge thing and you think everyone's going to go, wow, here's Mark Griskey again. And then it just, it doesn't go anywhere. And then it was, back to the drawing board. And one thing is I hate to say this, but to young artists, breaking in, but it's depressing that at a certain point you have to knock on the doors again and remind everybody who you are and that you're still alive and you're still young, compared to John Williams. I'm freaking young, right?
Yes.
I'm at the peak of my game right now. So I feel like I have to go out and remind everybody I'm there and I'm not, my music is better than ever,
Yeah.
But it's a constant promotion thing, and so I guess what I was saying earlier is that for a while it just seemed like the phone was ringing for me, and it's just like I didn't have to do that. But now, it's crickets and everything after COVID. So I go, well, I'll launch Mark Griskey 2.0, but I'm rethinking it now. How much do I want to do production music as opposed to game music? How much do I want to educate? Maybe I could start a YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah.
If I get some income there,
you can do anything you want, and it's like you can do education. You can do licensed music for these. Dennis has been doing these small packages of music for indie game developers to license for $20-something. You get like a few tracks. Like how many tracks, Dennis? 10. You get like 10 tracks for $20. So
I know someone who's actually the same business guy I was talking about before. He's making like $2,000 a month just off that passive income.
That's
like
Christ.
You do it, you're done, and you just watch the money roll in month after month.
That's the dream that we all want. Is we call it mailbox money.
Oh yeah.
The mailbox money, and unfortunately, when I got into video games, I hate to say it's like I wouldn't change anything. I'd go back and do it the same way because the wonderful experiences working with those giant orchestras and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of my friends that stayed in LA and maybe never worked on Star Wars, but just did kind of background music for TV shows, they seem to have bigger houses and nicer cars than me because of all that back end money, which you don't necessarily get in the games because,
but then again, at the end of the day, it might be a bigger house, but it's just a house,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that millennial mindset you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter what I have as long as I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the goal.
Exactly. So whatever you want to do in terms of reinventing yourself, we're going to be, behind you 100%. We're going to plug whatever you want to do. We're absolutely excited for whatever's coming up with you. We're going to be, keeping out with that. Absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about those projects that you did while you were working with LucasArts. Because I think you're probably best known for those, at least for most people. Now let's just break the timeline down here a little bit. You get hired by LucasArts when? 1990. 1990s?
2001.
2001.
I believe
Okay.
it was 2001.
2001.
I should find it somewhere. I have my hire letter because I wanted. It's coming up. It's my 20th year anniversary, so I'm
Wow.
gonna do a little video on this and show my
Yeah,
hire letter.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get hired by LucasArts. What's your first project working for them?
It was a game called Jedi Starfighter 2.
Jedi Starfighter 2. I love that
I
series.
I honestly don't remember much of it myself. It was just basically they needed some additional music to fill in. Mostly they used
For
John Williams
yes.
music
Yeah, it's mostly John.
edited in there.
Yeah.
But it was the first time I wrote for a few characters, and it was all MIDI based. It was all using samples and old samplers. Like when I started with them, they pointed me to a closet and said, "Here's some gear. Build yourself a studio." And it was all kind of already sort of outdated hardware samplers, and I took all of them and loaded them into this score. But so that one I don't remember so much. And then, other than, it was just like I was starting, it was mostly music editing, and we got on board. I kind of got my studio together. In the one after that, I would say I think of as my first job as Gladius, because that was an entirely original music score, and I got to do an hour's worth of music.
Yeah, Gladius. Gladius, to those of you who might not know, is it's an original piece of work by LucasArts. It has nothing to do with Star Wars, but it's a sort of this historical kind of.
Yeah, there aren't too many of those.
No.
Those
I mean, there were
non-Star
in the 1990s. There were.
Yeah.
You got.
Yes.
You got
like not too many that are known nowadays.
Yeah, but
I
then
I still do hear about Gladius.
Yeah, they did transition over to mostly Star Wars stuff in the 2000s, and to be fair, like the 2000s were the sort of golden age of Star Wars gaming. To be fair, now in 2003, Knights of the Old Republic drops the first game, right?
Yeah.
Jeremy Soule did the soundtrack for that. It was MIDI.
Yeah.
It was all MIDI.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it was also, I would say, the first real departure from John Williams.
It definitely was. Yeah, it sounds stylistically very, very different from John Williams. Not that that's not a bad thing at all, but it's very different.
They took a risk.
They did, and it worked.
Yeah.
It absolutely worked.
Yeah.
And I feel like that soundtrack and the soundtrack for the second game, which you worked on, those are fan favorites for a reason. They are the most beloved Star Wars game music for a reason. Now, let's talk about Knights of the Old Republic 2, because I think that might be, from my point of view anyway, your magnum opus in video game music. It's
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's something that was very helped me sort of cope essentially emotionally. The Knights of the Old Republic 2 soundtrack. Let's talk about that for a little bit. I had quite a difficult time when I was a kid, and video game and even classical music help with that, coping with those problems. So let's talk about KOTOR 2, because I think there's a lot of people who might want to hear about that. So when you got hired to do Knights of the Old Republic 2, do you think it was because of your personal sensibilities, or was it because Jeremy Soule wasn't available again for the sequel, or was there some other reason behind that?
Yeah, it was. I think there was multiple reasons. So I was at this point a salaried, staff guy at Lucas, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, to step back for a second, because you brought this up a minute ago about the original titles like Gladius, and then before that was Full Throttle, of course, Monkey Island, all these things.
Monkey Island.
When I was originally hired by LucasArts, they, I wish I had a copy of the job description, right? But it was like, we need a composer that can do it all, and they seem to be focused a lot on not only Star Wars, Indiana Jones, somewhat, but all these original titles. Now, once I got there, there was already an upheaval. This company has gone through so many upheavals. There's always a new president. There's always some disrupt, bunch of people getting laid off. So they went through this giant restructuring thing, and so I'm being told, yeah, we're going to do Monkey Island stuff and Full Throttle and all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'd rather do Star Wars, but that's fine. Just being the young composer wanting to,
Oh, yeah.
And then within
you want to get the meat,
Of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And then it all flipped on me. And then it was like, kind of be careful what you wish for, because all of a sudden, we've changed our and I was working on, I don't remember what, some music for some original title, maybe a Gladius 2 or something,
right?
Which ended up getting canceled, and they went back to the Star Wars model. And then I think the decision was just made that, like, well, if we have a staff guy and we've hired him and we're paying him,
we better make use of him. Yeah.
I think that's probably the main reason that they used me as opposed to Jeremy. I've never met Jeremy. I don't know much about him.
Oh.
Strangely enough, I've at these trade shows and stuff. I saw him speak once,
okay.
But I never had a chance to talk to him afterwards.
Right.
So he had already been, for whatever reasons, the team wanted something different. So I don't want to, I don't think it's a style. There's so many, there's politics and everything that are overarching above everything else. And sadly, a lot of times people making the decisions aren't necessarily listening to, what's going to create the best music. In my situation, back to KOTOR 2, I guess the other thing is I was pushing really hard to do this as a live recording.
Oh yeah,
with live orchestra.
The Seattle Symphony, was it?
Seattle Symphony, yes. And it's one of my favorite recordings to this day. I think I'll pat myself on the back a little bit.
It's beautiful. It sounds absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
John Kurlander was the engineer who recorded that. Now, John recorded all of the Lord of the Rings stuff.
Oh, wow.
Really? I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, John actually worked at Abbey Road Studios.
Yep.
He worked with the Beatles way back in the day. Wow. He's at least a decade older than me, right?
He had a career.
So I was lucky enough to get John, who knew how to get the sound out of that room, and we got this big, expansive Star Wars sound. So I think it was a hard sell for me. It was the first time a staff employee, had that type of budget to record live.
How much was it? Or are you allowed to disclose that, or is that?
I don't remember the numbers.
That's
but
okay.
I can. It's 2 days. 2 days with big orchestra.
We're probably talking in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
I was going to say about $200,000. Something like that.
Okay.
So that was a key thing for me. Is there was a lot of politics I needed to work through with Lucas is to educate them, because a lot of times the people that are in charge of these decisions, even if they know something about audio, don't necessarily know anything about music production.
Yeah.
So you have to sell to them, that it's worth doing this. And Obsidian, was on board with this, of course. And so, it almost didn't happen, and then it did, and suddenly I was greenlit. And then it was like, oh my God, be careful what you wish for. I have to write something that's going to stand up to, like,
John Williams, essentially. Yeah.
John Williams, and then also what Jeremy did with the first game, because like he said, it was this new sound. It was, how do I bridge that? How do I do something that still is in that universe, but I can only do what I really believe in and really feel myself genuinely. So you kind of absorb it, you live with it.
Talking about Jeremy, though, he has like his own sound because he uses his own like library.
He does.
That.
And that was part of that was part of the thing, though, too, is that Jeremy was so focused on doing it with all his computers that I was, a guy pitching something different to Lucas, saying, well, why don't we do it like John Williams does it?
Yeah, live and loud. Yeah.
I don't think that it could have been done with MIDI.
Absolutely not. No. Yeah.
You're right. It wouldn't sound too dense and thick.
And it's a lot more subtle. It's a lot more sophisticated. The music, not to dunk on Jeremy, but
those super thin sounding extended techniques.
Yes,
that are used a lot of the time, like especially with the strings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, at least to my ears, again, it's a lot more sophisticated, at least sort of in terms of writing the music. There's a lot more woodwind in there. There's a lot more strings, whereas the first game follows Dennis made an interesting comparison between the first game and the second game in terms of comparing them to the soundtrack between the original trilogy and the prequels. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dennis, right?
Yeah, it's the first game is meant to be a very sort of bombastic
sounding, very
it's good versus
brass,
evil,
brass,
war gear,
classical fantasy,
The second game, of course, is very and everything's in the shadows.
It's a subversive. It's a very subversive take on the Star Wars universe. Now let's cover a little bit about those details regarding when you were writing the music, and this goes into your general kind of workflow as well. How much did you actually communicate with Chris Avellone about the story and the themes and stuff like that, and the sort of atmosphere with the game?
A fair amount. So I was in direct communication with the development team at this point, because I was a staff guy at Lucas. And the reason I'm pointing that out is it strangely enough changed when I became a contractor, and it would have to kind of funnel through the loop. It's like it always has to funnel through all these
corporate structure. The bureaucracy.
And so exactly. So what I loved about is that I could speak to Chris Avellone directly. You know, I mean, that in itself is just like amazing. Like you'd be shocked to know how many games where I'm not communicating directly with the people that are making the visuals. The guy that's making the sound here has to go through there.
Also have to do with Obsidian being a fairly new company at that point. And it just being a very small
branching off of Black Owl Studios. This is like I believe Knights of the Old Republic 2 was their first game.
I think so. Yeah.
Obsidian's first game. I believe so.
BioWare gave them a chance on that and wanted to do their own stuff. So.
Yeah.
BioWare.
Yeah. I mean, it was. Yeah. It was wonderful working with the team. The direction, it wasn't like we were in there like going back and forth on every cue. God, I'd have to dig up my notes, which I'm sure I've saved because I have a folder of like old contracts and notes. But they send me all the design documents, and it was very well. I'm trying to remember the word that they were using, but for my main theme, it was exactly how you were describing the game. Everything's in the shadows. Everything is like, it's not kind of revealed. And so you don't just put an exclamation point behind the button of every piece of music. So I only have a few cues that maybe just like really pop out in that very direct way. The rest of it, the lead, audio lead on the project, Julian Kwasniewski, who's the head of Bay Area Sound. He's an ex-Lucas guy, so he did like a lot of voiceover for these things and sound design stuff. But he heard the first tracks of my music, the MIDI mock-ups, and stuff, and heard it in the game, and he goes, sneaking around music, was his interpretation. It's almost that. It's almost like a spy, I didn't, retrospectively, I could see where, it's interesting to hear how somebody will respond to, especially a non-musician.
Yeah, it does come up that way, And the way I've always talked about KOTOR 2 is that it feels like every track has a certain kind of tenseness in a way behind it. There's always this sort of unease, bubbling directly underneath the even the more lighthearted tracks like B4D4, the Isis Cantina track.
Sure.
Yeah, it's always this darker kind of this unease bubbling right underneath the surface, and I love that. I love the atmosphere of KOTOR 2. It's my favorite soundtrack to work to, actually. I'm an artist.
Neat.
I like to paint. I draw and paint, do illustration, stuff like that. And Knights of the Old, Knights 2, that's the one I default to. When I need something to, inspire me, a whole lot. That's what I go to.
For me, that was one of my original when I was young, first started playing trumpet, and my teacher would have me like write out something to play so I could get experience, like actually writing, like handwriting sheet music and stuff like that, like little bits. I would use tracks from that game.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so like that soundtrack, that game and that soundtrack, they've had a tremendous impact, probably bigger than you even realize, actually. It's highly beloved, the soundtrack, the game overall. And yeah, let's go a little bit more into that, actually, because we have quite a bit of questions here regarding that. So
Yeah.
there's let's talk some more about some particular tracks, or some not tracks but pieces, what I like to call them. The track or the theme, the motif from Malachor, right? That's a very, very dark one by Star Wars standards, a very disconcerting one. And I was wondering, like, was the direction behind that to specifically evoke the Hiroshima kind of mass death that had taken place on that planet? Was the idea to, in terms of sound, evoke that in player minds when it came down to writing that piece?
Yeah, I mean, not specifically that, but I mean, it was just in that game. Here's the one location. There's characters, there's plots. Here's one location that just is just evil Sith. It's volcanic. It's like the lava of Sith evil is spewing out of it.
Oh yeah.
And it just, I don't know. It's just like that almost wrote itself. And it was, I just posted something because I was listening to, the links you sent of music you want to talk about. And I posted, it's like Mark Griskey was channeling, Igor Stravinsky or something like that.
Pretty much. It does sound like that. Yeah.
I can't really tell you other than, like, to tie back to what you just said a minute ago about the wanting to listen to certain music as an artist. I also like to be inspired by the visuals. So I had asked the team for all the artwork, and I would just print it out on their nice laser printers, and I just hung it all over the wall. So if I'm working on Malachor this week, I take down all the wall artwork taped up, and I stick Malachor artwork all around me. So I just want to see that, and that's what the music really is, just a reflection of the visuals of that world, as far as I could see with our design documents and maybe a pre-build of the game or something like that, to make you feel like you were there, to immerse you into Sith evil on some volcanic planet. It's very primal.
Very barren, very empty. Exactly like that. This actually ties into what I'm interested in your workflow, your sort of the way you go about working. What's your general kind of workflow like when you start on one of these bigger projects? Do you usually get the script, or do you just go by concept art, or what's the approach here we're talking about?
Yeah, well, it's one thing that I've found after 20 plus years, working as a professional composer, and 20 years certainly in the video game industry. Every project is different, so it's like I thought that there would be like, oh, this is how it's going to work next time, and it's always so. Yes, I want to get as much information at the bare minimum, some sort of script, some sort of design document is how they would often refer to it. And I would usually get voluminous amounts of this. And then I would definitely reach out and try to find who the concept artist is, or see if I could get a direct, connection with the art people. And actually, along those lines, the concept artist for Gladius, he may have worked on KOTOR 2 as far as I know, but James Zhang started this company, Concept Art House in San Francisco. And we've worked together, for years afterwards. We developed this great relationship. He told me exactly what you told me a minute ago, man. He loved to do his concept art listening to my rough tracks of the Gladius stuff.
Wow.
So he's listening to my raw Gladius music as he's making the characters. I'm looking at his raw Gladius characters pasted on the walls. I'm creating it. It's like this synergy that feeds back.
Synergy. Yeah, exactly.
So he was inspired by you. That was inspired by him. That was
inspired by you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the way it should work. And it's one of my, I don't remember the original question at this point, but it's one of my, the things that it's kind of bumming me out right now, and like kind of how I want to restructure myself is I need to make it important in the future that I'm allowed to have that communication. I think it's so important.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes the IP police, right, going, well, this is Star Wars, and or this is whatever, Marvel, Disney, it doesn't matter. We need to go through our channels, and you don't feel like you have that sort of back and forth where you're both inspired. It's more like I'm just writing in a vacuum. For some of the latest updates.
Of course, it's important to understand the distinction between working for somebody and collaborating with somebody.
With somebody, yes. There's very much of a difference.
Perfect.
When it's like, I need this much music, I need it to be like this, do this for me.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, could you look at this stuff and just like work with me on this? Like we're going to create a beautiful product together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead. If you had something to
No. Just I think that on KOTOR 2, all this stuff was kind of happening really well. And even though I was pretty green, really, to video games, it just seemed like all the cylinders were kicking right. And then again, it's like you get to later projects and you think it's going to work like this, and you find it's a real struggle just to get that communication happening or that sort of vibe happening because of the corporate structure and everyone moves around so much. They're fired and they're over here, and now they're this and they're this title.
Well, kind of going into that, and how corporate thinking affects these games sometimes. To work on them.
Very unfortunate.
The fact that there was a lot of content cut from KOTOR 2, which I never truly realized how much it was until I beat the game for the first time, and I was listening to credits, and I went, I don't recognize that theme. I don't recognize that one either. I never heard that.
Never heard that in the game.
And I looked into it, and I'm like, oh, this is from some planet called M478 that was cut from the game. Yeah. And I was like, wait, a whole planet? And I wanted to ask you if that all that content being cut from the game, one, did they inform you about that, and if your music was going to be cut from the game and stuff like that, and just like the M478 stuff in general, what was the whole deal with the content being cut from the game?
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's this happens a lot, it's like,
I would imagine,
in the game development, they have these expansive ideas, and then for whatever reasons, there's going to be a deadline, and I guess the for whatever reason has to do with their marketing team and the projections of how much money it's going to make, and
I can actually illuminate on that a little bit, because the reason for Knights 2 was that LucasArts wanted the game out for Christmas orders in 2004. Yeah, so that was
exactly
the reason.
Exactly. And that has happened to me more times than I really want to admit. It's like on so many titles. There's so much something's
so
always
tragic.
Cut.
It's tragic. Yeah. It's horrible that you hire people to create this beautiful art, this wonderful acoustic art, and so much of it gets wasted. And it never gets released either. And you can't release it as an artist because you're contractually obligated to, keep it secret or whatever. You got the.
Are you aware that the game has been finished by fans?
Yes.
Well, he's aware. This is news to me, and I was reading about that earlier. I was prepping for this interview.
Oh yeah.
I want to see it. I want to play it out.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened is that I was actually so it's a bit of a long story, but in a nutshell, a bunch of fans, which includes myself at the time, we formed a group called Team Gizga to finish Knights of the Old Republic 2, because the cut content in that game was included. It was shipped in the box, actually. It was hidden in the game files, because it was cut so late on in the development cycle that they said, fuck it, we're just gonna stick the whole thing into the the files, even if we never implement it in the actual game itself, right?
And to cut with that too.
Yeah.
To cut you off really quickly, this if you remember the very first version of the game, they screwed up all my audio. It was in mono and it was lo-fi, and they had to make some sort of patch
to
update that, and then that became the soundtrack that everybody, like, I have fans saying, how can I get the album? And I say, you can't, except for you can get it for free if you just click on this link here with this patch, which gave all the high-res audio files.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So basically, they shipped it. They shipped it with it was broken.
I didn't know that. I think I was too young at the time. But.
Knights of the Old Republic 2 is an incredible achievement in terms of video games, not only because of the story, which is highly philosophical. It's very low concept story in a very high concept universe, right?
Yeah.
But just the fact that Obsidian had like a 10-month development cycle with that game. They had 10 months, and you guys, all of you put out an incredible, a timeless classic, modern classic as far as I'm concerned. Even though it was broken, like, even though there were a lot of bugs and glitches, none of that matters because the story is in there, right? And the music is in there, and the total experience, right? So Knights of the Old Republic 2 continues to be remembered by the fans and adored by the fans for a reason. It's again, an incredible achievement, and I'm just so grateful that you made the push to record in, with an actual, orchestra in a real setting. So thank you for that.
Did you conduct it?
I did not conduct that one.
Oh, okay.
And here's the thing: is I don't conduct.
Okay.
Neither does many composers, and the reason, I studied a little bit of conducting. I think I have kind of the hang of it until I actually try to do it. And what happens is you've written 60 minutes of music, right?
Right.
In I don't know, like a month and a half or something, right?
Oh yeah.
You actually don't remember what you wrote before, like when it comes up. So if you're doing the mechanics of conducting, and then trying to listen, I would find myself getting to the end of the queue and not having really listened to my own music because I was too busy trying to conduct, the people coming in and cue them and this and that. So my orchestrator, Jeff Marsh, who I've used on everything, including Knights of the Old Republic, anytime I can, if I have a choice, is an excellent conductor, and he really enjoys this. So I like to sit in the booth, and then that way I can be in the recording booth, and then if I'll pick on one of you here. If the trumpets are out of tune, I can say
it happens.
I can say to Jeff,
it happens.
I can say, he missed the high D, or something, and then Jeff politically correctly, doesn't point out the guy that did it wrong, and just says, "We'll take it again, and let's definitely trumpets, pay attention to intonation," or something like that. So he can concentrate on keeping the session moving so that we get through all the material. I can hear it, make notes, circle things in the score as it's going down, so I can then get on the talkback immediately and give my partner Jeff. Now, I conducted Gladius and some of it. Actually, now that I think about it, David Collins, one of the sound designers, was really into conducting. And again, I took advantage of that. I prefer to be in the booth, but it is nice to be, there in front of all those wonderful musicians. But I get carried away conducting and don't pay attention to the job of being a music producer.
It happens. Yeah. Now
and it goes by quickly.
Yeah, it does. I would imagine that. Yeah. Now, going off of Knights 2, there's actually the sort of related topic of the Old Republic, the MMO. That, I believe, was a collaboration between a lot of different artists. The music, a lot of different composers working on that project. Was there inner communication between all of you? Was it sort of like the bunch of you getting together to write the music, or was it individually coming up with the cues and pieces, or how did that project go?
Yeah, well, for the original release, and as long as I was still kind of, I guess I'll just say pre-Disney, is really, there was a big shift that happened with how Lucas is handling things.
Yeah,
or how,
I would imagine. Yeah,
who's in charge, and I don't even know. It's all sorts of complexities. But back to the original release of it, we were a tight team, right? I had myself as the lead composer of the project.
Yes.
By this time, LucasArts had 2 salaried staff employees, and I was a freelancer, right? So I was no longer, on salary with them. And of course, they want to, they're paying these guys just like, like I told you how I got the KOTOR's.
Oh yeah.
Thing. Of course they want to be included, even if their job title is, or what they're primarily doing is music editing up to that point.
Yeah, it's Star Wars. Come on.
So of course we included them, and that was great. And then I already mentioned my buddy Jeff Marsh, who conducts. He's also a wonderful composer. A lot of people in music wear multiple hats. We have to.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So I tapped his skills for a couple of key cues, and then it was Jesse Harlan over at LucasArts who wanted to pull in his buddy Gordy Hab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I love
Gordy Hab.
Gordy.
Yeah, and Gordy's great. We've gotten to, we're good friends, and we were a very tight team. So, and then of course, forgetting who's the other staff composer that we had.
Jesse Harlan, at least, was one of the in-house Lucasfilm composers in the 2000s. So, yeah.
I'm trying to remember too. I remember another name on the Old Republic. I can't think of it.
I can't think of it off the top of my head either. I would have to look it up at this point. I don't know if it's necessary, but yeah. Going back to the sort of workflow on that game. So it's a very collaborative project, right? You're working on it. How many years did that take? It was quite a long development cycle, was it not? Something like maybe 4 or 5 years on that game.
This is one of the strangest stories ever, because I was told I needed to deliver all of the final music a full year before the game actually shipped.
Oh wow!
So I don't know how long they were in development before they got me in, but me as
I remember hearing about this game back in like 2007.
Yeah, 2007 is when it was like revealed to the public, right? But I would imagine the development had been going on for a year or two prior to that point.
Yeah, probably prior to when KOTOR 3 was canceled.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would imagine.
And then I became involved. It was just like, it was just a full-time thing, because I was managing all these composers as well, right?
Yeah.
And sort of, producing the score. We recorded in Eastern Europe as well as Skywalker Sound at that one, and then we had to do pickups like a year later or so at Abbey Road Studios, because we recorded everything and they insisted they needed the music. It's one of those things where I'm like going, well, why could you possibly need the music when the game doesn't work yet? Right? I'm savvy enough about game development to know that there's no way you're going to hit this ship date.
Yeah.
But they'll insist and they'll push everyone for it. And the problem is, if you're trying to arrange all these orchestral sessions and everything, it's just, you can't just keep. I had one contractor yelling at me on the phone when I tried to change. Oh my God, you can't change it now. I had to call 80 musicians. We had to, and so there was a lot of drama. We went and we recorded it. And then after they had a chance to listen to it for a year, they went, you know what, we want to re-record the main theme and add like an extra 10 seconds to it, and then do this and that. And then we went and re-recorded it. It cost a lot of money. We went to Abbey Road, but that's the strange thing about the game development. And then it's honestly, after that title, it just got so weird on how they were handling things. I was no longer in charge, so I was no longer the person that could produce it, and it was the shift, I guess, with Disney or something.
Disney,
so it became really strange. It became like, and it's not even Disney's fault. Because I worked
disbanded.
Yeah.
Well, kind of. They still exist on paper is the strange thing. And the strange thing is I, reach out and try to even look for work myself with these two organizations. I get mixed messages on who's in charge. Does Disney own the Star Wars brand or not?
Or not, yeah. It seems like, not to go too deep into that, because it's a very divisive topic amongst the fans, obviously. Yeah. But it seems like the corporate leadership at LucasArts, or Lucasfilm rather, is not what it used to be anymore. It seems to be a very messy affair.
Things seem to be changing almost every day.
Almost every single day, yeah.
It's like, of course, since the Disney buyout, you've had LucasArts exist, then of course LucasArts went into like disbandment or whatever, and
they
had
prior
BioWare was doing it, and then EA had the license, and now Lucasfilm Games exists.
Yeah, prior to that point, you had this one visionary ahead of the whole organization, making essentially all the executive decisions. Ultimately, George was in charge, essentially, of everything. And it was like this. George often said that he refers to like Lucasfilm as a benevolent dictatorship, essentially, and that's how it comes across. And like a lot of people forget that Lucasfilm was a limited liability company. It wasn't a public company ever.
Yeah, I know.
George never went public. Yeah, and God bless him, by the way. Very, very wise choice, as far as I'm concerned. So,
no, it's so puzzling, because that, like you said, it's going back to KOTOR 2.
Yeah,
and my connection with the artists, and the way that in my head I'm going, this is my first big breakout video game, right? This is the way it's going to work moving forward. And then it hasn't been like as good since. So it's like I'm always really confused as like, where I fit in, or how I'm going to communicate, at least right now. I think there's and then COVID didn't help, right? So back to the topic of all these composers on KOTOR 2, it started out as a really tight team.
The Old Republic. The Old Republic, rather.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank
It's okay.
Yes.
It's okay. Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me. So we were a tight team, and we not only shared all the stuff, we enjoyed sharing our stuff. It's like, so it's like, if I'm creating the theme for such and such light side planet, and I send it to Lenny Moore because he's doing another light side.
That was Lenny Moore. Yes, that was the in-house. Yeah, the name. Yeah.
No, he's actually he was part of my team. So Lenny was somebody that I introduced as an additional orchestrator.
Right.
As well as he brought a whole team of. We had so many people. We had, I don't know, at some point there was probably 12 orchestrators working on that thing. We generated thousands of pages of music, right? Because that's the thing people don't realize, is like they have to read it. Classical musicians don't improvise, right? You don't come in and say, play them the thing and say, play it like this.
It's not a jazz session by any means.
Every note needs to be written out, and
you especially notice that when you want to change something, they have to write it in the sheet music, otherwise they're not going to play. They have to take out a pencil and make the changes on the sheet, because they're not going to remember it when you do that next thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, like if you're used to dealing, like if you're a rock musician or a jazz musician, you get into film scoring or media composition, and you're lucky enough to work with a big orchestra and everything like that.
Right.
It's like they're a different breed of musician. Now I'm a classically trained percussionist, so I understand this, because I hung out with these people in music college. But I was a jazz drummer who got a classical percussion degree.
Right.
But people that are raised that way, so it's just a different mindset. To me, it's mind blowing that somebody couldn't just improvise and make up a song, right? That's what music is, right? You pick up the guitar and you make it up, and you play it and you learn all the notes and everything.
Yeah.
A lot of these classical musicians are brilliant players, brilliant interpreters, but they will not change anything unless you specifically tell them to do it, and they put it in notation, whether it's a dynamic marking or it's not even changing a note. It's just, put a crescendo in here, meaning play this phrase a little bit louder, put an accent on the last one, and put a little, comma mark to make sure that you leave a breath before the next downbeat, leave a little space in it. So anyway, my point back to I think it was beautiful. I think our original team was the team, and then I don't know what happened with all the updates. Like the last one that I did, I stopped getting invited to the recording sessions.
Damn.
And the mix sessions, and then I just didn't have any control anymore. I wasn't, even though I was credited as the lead composer on this project. Something changed and it became this giant thing. I don't know. I saw names on some email thread, with all these other composers I had never met before, that suddenly were writing music for it. But of course they gave me all the hardest stuff. Mark's going to write all the boss battles and action cues. And then, we're going to bring these people in to write this and that.
To be fair, they did get the best man for the job. So,
oh, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely.
I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind. The funny thing is, because of how the payment structure normally works in video games,
right.
I don't get paid anymore to write the harder stuff that takes twice as long as the easy stuff.
Right.
You're still making the same. Yeah, exactly. So, but I'm a sucker for that. Hey, give it to me. It's I want the meaty stuff. That's
right.
That's what I got into it for. Yeah. We've been talking about us millennials.
Yeah, exactly. Us millennials.
Whenever I am writing something and it's oh yeah, you just want me to write something ambient. Okay, yeah, this is gonna take me 2 days. Okay, it's fine, but
yeah.
If someone gives me something that's going to take me weeks to write this insanely complicated thing, it's going to be so much more fun and satisfying. So I completely understand that.
Yeah. So
to be fair, I feel like a lot of us artists, whether it be musicians or illustrators or whatever, writers even, I feel like a lot of us put out our best work under pressure. When the deadlines are tight.
Absolutely.
And I think like the best example of that in gaming history is probably Koji Kondo and the Legend of Zelda theme, because he cranked that thing out in 24 hours. That's incredible.
And it's one of the most iconic themes ever created in video games.
Who would have thought? Yeah, who would have thought? Made in less than 24 hours and goes on to become one of the most iconic themes in all of entertainment. Who knew?
And that was after he already revolutionized the game music with music.
Yeah.
Has that been recorded by a big orchestra?
Yes. I can actually give you a link to the. There was 10 years ago. There was a 25th anniversary edition of the music. Yeah, so I can give you the link. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful to listen to actually. So I can, after the interview is over here, I can give you the link and you can listen to your own time, or on your own time rather. Let's we have a few more questions if you don't mind.
Of course.
Yeah. So let's talk about sort of the music industry in general, because I feel like there's been a lot of, even I as a person who's more in the pop music, rock music side of things rather, even I've noticed, these things, and there's been a lot of changes, and out of all the things that have changed in your time in the industry, what are some of the better changes that you feel have made things better for the artist? And what, if anything, has been, worse for the worse? What has changed for the worse, rather?
I think I could address that with some thread that I've been thinking about lately.
I feel maybe one of the bigger problems is the corporatization of the music industry overall.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm working on my master's degree in music now and learning for the first time how the business works. Right? What we see, of course, is the digital revolution. Of course, that's extremely positive that like pretty much anyone can really be an artist, right? You can get on YouTube tomorrow and like, hey, if you're talented, I mean, this guy, Jacob Collier, right?
Yeah, I hear that name a lot.
Yeah, just an amazing talent, incredible ability to discern pitch on a level that like seems superhuman to me. But he's a product of, I don't know if he would be discovered or have a chance with the old, industry, the way it worked. Conversely, though, I would say that everybody needs to be a celebrity and a talk show host or something if they're a musician. Just like you said, like wearing the business hat. Now you gotta wear a business hat when you do your books and make sure that you paid your taxes and you 1099 your employees. And I created an S corp back in the day, right? So I have a corporation, Mark Griskey Music.
Yeah.
Inc. As an S corp, there's my business structure, and that's just what you have to do. And on top of it, now I have to for Mark Griskey 2.0, I have to be a celebrity. I have to have a channel, and it's great if you're into that and that's your natural personality. But many introverts like myself aren't naturally like that. I mean, as I've gotten older and older, and just because I've had to be on camera and stuff like that, I've become more extroverted naturally. But that's not not my natural thing. I don't want to sit there and necessarily talk about my stuff. I want to think about it and do it. You know?
I be a composer anymore because now you're in a sea of composers. Everybody all realized that, I can do this thing now. There's nothing stopping me from getting my music out there. And so now you have to be special. You have to stand out from the crowd, and you have to have all these special abilities that everybody else might not have.
Yeah, and the lucky thing for you, Mark, is that in music, age is a number. It doesn't matter. So your age has nothing to do with the quality of your music. So you're on the sort of even level playing field with everybody else.
One would think so, but I think there is, and it's just a young industry still, and there's a lot of young people in games, and a lot of them may think I might look like an old grandpa if I go or something. Not that it's. I mean
that's
strange.
That's a very shallow way of judging somebody's music.
I know, but here's the thing: is like what concerns me is the people making the decisions on who to hire or who not to hire might not necessarily even care. They might not even care. They might just be back to your point, a corporate executive. Back to your point about the age thing. Yeah, I just see some ageism in the industry. For me, and for creatives in general. I think anyone who understands how it really works will, it's like, hey, if they're hiring John Williams in his 80s, maybe Mark in his 50s is not so old after all, But what they do is they're looking for the new sound. It's a marketing thing that they're always like, hey, let's mix it. I did 3 games for Ubisoft, Raving Rabbids 1, 2, and 3. They loved me. They flew me out to a wrap party after the 3rd one, and I was on this private ship, and they flew me to Paris and everything because they invited me to the wrap party. And I said, "Well, do you guys even realize I'm in the United States?" They said, "Well, we'll fly you out, right?"
Damn.
They come to Raymond 4, right? And I had to audition, and I lost the gig to a composer who had never done games before.
Oh wow!
Because they thought in their head that they were going to do something totally different and redefine, they keep making new. It's always new, better, improved. It's the marketing people that have so much control in these corporate structures.
And I feel like that's the sort of idea of constantly evolving things and constantly doing new things. That's sort of reflection of society as a whole, really, at least here in the West. You have this idea of progressivism, that everything has to constantly improve and evolve.
Bigger, better.
And that's not necessarily always what you want. Sometimes you want to look back, and sometimes there are things that are not broken that don't need to be fixed.
Exactly.
I also think it's honestly just like corporations not really getting it.
Yeah, they don't
Like,
get it.
They
yeah.
think that they get it. They think that they have it all figured out.
Yeah,
in terms
there's-
of being
yeah,
like,
there's-
oh, young people play video games, therefore, we need young people to compose.
Yeah, for the games. Yeah,
Yep.
that.
Yeah. It's. I was just reading something because I was coming up with this notion in my own head because I'm coming up with ideas. If I do write a book or something about what I've done, it's something.
Right.
Interesting things. And one of the concepts I came up with was the inverted org chart, like the guy at the top, of the company that knows the least, right?
Yes.
And so I Googled it to see if this was a concept, it's not called the inverted org chart. It's called the iceberg at the top or something.
Yeah.
And somebody did a very detailed breakdown of this that the frontline workers, so this would be in the video game industry, this would be your tech support. Your tech support people that you call up and say, hey, my KOTOR is not broken. They're probably hardcore gamers. They probably know everything about the game and know what the fans are unhappy about.
Yeah.
And it needs to be fixed. And then if you go up the org chart, like their managers only know about 50% of that. And by the time you get to the top, it's 4%.
Yeah.
So the people at the top of the corporation are that far removed.
Yeah. Very
of what
illiterate.
the fans are saying.
Yeah. And that actually, George Lucas had something to say about that because he had a talk where he talked about the motion picture industry, and he never walked in Hollywood. He's never been a Hollywood. He's been an indie director all his life. Like most people don't realize that Star Wars music are indie movies. They're huge budget indie movies, right? Yeah. So what he had to say about Hollywood is that if you go into the motion picture industry, don't go into Hollywood because it's full of studio executives who don't know what they're doing. It's full of idiots.
Never trust a big corporation.
Never trust a big corporation. It's full of people who think they know what they're doing, but they really don't. And you don't. And he put it in a very funny way. He said, "You don't want to be tyrannized by people who are not as smart as you are." Yeah, and I feel that's true. Yeah, absolutely. Stay indie. Stay independent.
I definitely realize that when I'm because I do have a day job, and just like the amount of like the stupidity that you that just rains down on you every day.
Dennis,
like, wow.
I know.
Dennis,
You look up, you just go, oh great. Look
Dennis,
what they're dumping on me now.
Yeah, Dennis works at he has a day job at Home Depot, I believe. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. There you go. At least it's on. At least they're not behind a desk somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it kind of fits into my original thing when I had to have a day job. When I'm starting out, and I was I wasn't a full-time musician until I was in my 30s, really.
Right.
And then I didn't have to have a day job anymore. But it's Home Depot would be a day job I would take because I'm hoping that I can get if I want to build my studio, maybe I can get access to damaged lumber for free or something like that, or some
no joke. When I was when I was building my studio, I built these bass traps from stuff that I got when I was there.
There you go.
When I was at work.
That's exactly exactly the type of thing I would be thinking about if I were in your position. Like how do you make it work for the bigger picture?
But you have to utilize it.
Yeah.
But back to this, this corporate structure thing is so interesting that George kind of is feeling from Disney what I'm kind of felt with George's company in a way that LucasArts itself, like, it's one thing. Okay, George had so many companies, and I never met the man. 20 years working for him because he's reserved, he's quiet, he's something, but also
and he's very and he was very busy at the time. Always his days were absorbed with Star Wars. Like he spent 2 more decades with Star Wars than he intended, actually. So and the thing is the company grows, so George is thinking of his thing, he's working on Star Wars and everything like that. The company's growing and they're doing it. So
like the people that they recruit. It doesn't matter even if it is an LLC that's
Yeah.
not a publicly traded company
Yeah.
or something like that.
It's
the
still
corporate mentality.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
becomes that. It becomes a thing that is out of control on its own unless you're. The guy I liked at LucasArts was this guy by the name of Jim Ward, who was president. He took over right after I joined, and the previous guy, who I have nothing against, and seemed like a nice guy or anything, I never dealt with, right?
Yeah.
But Jim, when he took over the company, he met with every single employee one-on-one. So
That's
I'm
fantastic.
sitting here, with the president of LucasArts,
Yeah.
and he sat down next to me in my studio and asked me what I do, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, And it turns out that Jim is a classically trained pianist, so we hit it off and we got along great. But the funny thing is the end of our conversation, because he's restructuring the company, I volunteered to get laid off after that.
Oh, wow.
Because I felt like I would serve the company better as an independent contractor, because I knew of all the problems that I was encountering when I did the KOTOR 2 session. It was so hard to get everyone paid and contract these people. And I thought, well, if I create my own Mark Griskey Music Inc., S Corp, I can handle and be this for you guys and be a black box, And that's what we did. That's why I'm still working for LucasArts after 20 years. It was like almost 4 years on staff, and then another 17 or something as a contractor. But now I'm not even clear. I don't even literally know who to contact right now and say, hey, is there any upcoming work for 2021, or do you guys need any Star Wars music? I'm qualified,
Oh yeah.
You have the credits.
Yeah, you have the credits. If somebody has qualifications, Mark Griskey does. So phone him, contact the guy. Dudes, come on, go ahead.
I know. I will reach out.
Yeah. Because you came back. You left Lucas for a few years, right?
Yes.
2000s, and then you came back.
Yeah. I left. So to clarify, so I was recruited, as a salaried guy, as a paid staff guy.
Right.
In 2001, and kept that position through about 2004. And like the conversation I just mentioned with Jim Ward, they did the restructuring, is when I volunteered basically to get laid off. So they laid me off with a lot of other people, and they moved LucasArts from its little location in Marin County to the
Letterman Digital Studios
Art Center.
Or Art Center,
exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Why I didn't go through that transition, because I realized that if I stayed with the company for the next year, I wouldn't write any music. I would just be part of this sure, you're going to pay me a salary. I'd probably go to a bunch of meetings, and they were going to design an in-house recording studio that I didn't think, it wasn't adequate for my needs. We're not going to record an orchestra there. It's a voiceover studio.
Yeah.
And
so it was a matter of sort of the next year not being fulfilling due to not being able to work, essentially doing what you love doing, which is composition, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I thought, well, why pay me a salary to do what I don't want to do when I could freelance? Because they're laying off all these people. Some of them were happy about it. Some of them were really pissed off. People were quitting. It's a whole restructuring. I mean, there's hundreds of people being displaced. It turned out those people went to work for like Disney and Marvel and stuff. Yeah. And exactly as I hoped, I had a whole career of basically disgruntled LucasArts employees or ex LucasArts. Yeah, some of them were disgruntled. Some were very happy, but they moved on. Like myself, it's like it just makes better sense to do it this way. So because of that restructuring, I did not do any music for LucasArts for about a year or so until Tor came out, and then true to their word, they contracted me, and then my relationship with them was as an independent contractor.
That explains the whole thing. Yeah, we were kind of confused about that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I took a position with Disney Publishing Worldwide through 2015. Was it like 2012 through 2015, and
Right.
it's kind of a similar situation. Well, I explained it that I was offered this giant, job for this Chinese, company,
Yeah.
and it was like, how can I turn this down? Because like the Disney day job, even though we were working on wonderful franchises, I got to work on Frozen and meet the executive producer
Yeah.
for the film. I did all sorts of additional music for every Disney franchise you could think of, from Planes to Monsters Inc. and the sequels to that.
Oh yeah.
They wanted to do this Disney stuff, but again, they didn't have a budget. And I was working for their iPhone division, right, or their app division.
Right.
These were like these were apps that were designed for a younger audience, for children and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was actually a wonderful period for me as a composer to have to like do a Frozen app this week, Monsters Inc. next week, and then I got 2 weeks to do this and that. But I just didn't want to go back. I didn't want to do Star Wars stuff for these guys, and then they started wanting to do these Star Wars apps without a budget. And I said, why can't we just license the music I already recorded for or something like that? I'll give it to you for free.
They did do that sometimes. I know. I mean, the Revenge of the Sith
Yes.
video game used some of your KOTOR 2 music.
Yeah, they did. The Revenge of the Sith, the licensed movie video game that came out in 2005, they used your KOTOR 2 music in the soundtrack. Yeah, they did.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, if you go look at some of the scenes, like the gameplay
cut scenes,
it's interesting to hear nowadays. Like back then, I don't really think I noticed when I was playing.
Yeah,
it,
I did, but that was because I played the game when it came out. Knights of the Old Republic 2 came out in 2004. I'm 10 at this point. So these games were very defining, or not defining for me, but like helped to define my sort of growth as an artist, especially as an artist, and also as a human being. These stories, Knights 1 and Knights 2, and they're still, to me, they're still like on the top of my list. I don't play that many games anymore. I don't have the time anymore at this point. I'm 27. I'm turning 27 in April, and I'm just too I just graduated from film school a few days ago, actually. So yeah.
Congrats. That's awesome, man. I think I mentioned this early on as we were talking, that I would be embarrassed to tell you actually how many years of college I have, but I only really picked up one degree at this point. I'll eventually finish this master's degree, but I went back to school and I studied at UCLA. They have a film scoring program, but I got the job with Disney and had to move to Northern California. So when I moved back to LA, like 15 years later, they said those credits don't count anymore. You'd have to start over. So I never got that degree. And then I studied privately with, it's just a lifelong learning thing, man. So, it doesn't matter the age, just like you were telling me with the music, and, and I got a little, there's still ages, but no, you're right. It's like creative people, there is no time limit. I don't think anyone's going to say you're too old to create art.
No. And art is, as I said, I said on Twitter, I believe a number of days ago, that I strongly believe that art, life is suffering. Life is full of suffering, and it's mostly just, with some occasional periods of respite, essentially. But the job of an artist is to transmute the suffering into something more beautiful.
I love that definition.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And art is a very important and a very undervalued part of society, I feel. People don't appreciate art
really
the way they
about
should. Yeah, they really don't.
I agree.
Think about what it would be without it. Like, just think it, like go through your day sometime and just go, hey, there's music playing in this store that I'm in right now. There's music playing from this guy's radio, or there's like, look at this billboard up here that someone designed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the flip side of that, though, is I hate when it's overused or abused. And I don't know if this is so much true, like if you're offended as a visual artist, the way that sometimes I'm offended as a musician, that even though it is wonderful that we have, I listen to commercials that I love and I go, turn that up. That's a bitching commercial. But there's times that I don't want it, man. And it's like when you're on the phone and you're on hold, you're waiting for a human being, right? On tech support, you hear distorted monophonic music coming out of my iPhone, and I don't want to listen to this because it's bothering me because it's distorted and monophonic, and
Yeah.
it's like just like it becomes background when it's almost so ubiquitously used without discretion or reverence.
Yeah, and
my elevator music has that connotation.
Music, yeah. And our relationship as a society has changed over the past 100 years. Our relationship to music, it's changed from, it used to be that if you wanted to experience music, you would have to go to a live event. You would have to go to an opera or a ballet or something else of that sort. And now
learn how to play the instrument.
Yeah, exactly. Now you can listen to you can listen to the entire canon of Western music on your phone. That's incredible, but it comes with these downsides, and this sort of consumerist nature of music and art as a whole is one of those downsides, unfortunately. So, but I feel like we're actually Dennis has a time limit. I could talk infinitely.
We could. I know, yeah, me too. I gotta like go hang out with my wife though. She's wondering, like, hey, how long is this really going?
Is it possible for us to ask 2 more questions, if you don't mind?
Of course.
All right.
I'll try to be
2 more.
succinct.
All right. Okay. So and then we're gonna have to go. But for now, we were actually. I was wondering about your primary sort of stylistic influences, not only in terms of classical composers, but possibly film composers or even pop musicians. Like, who are your sort of your primary sources that you draw on for inspiration?
Well, strangely enough, is I mentioned that trumpet was my first instrument, and I kind of failed. I just I was just in 4th grade. All the boys played trumpeters, but that was my introduction. And what was so exciting is to sit there in the class and see all the music and everything. And then I graduated to drums in junior high school. But I like that drum thing over there. I want to play that. So I've always been, I guess, if I have a natural talent for music, it might be in the rhythmic area and kind of like a larger, it's not like I'm somebody who's got a gifted voice who could sing, perfectly and, perfect pitch or something as a child. So because of the drums and everything, jazz, fusion, the 1970s is when electronic music was introduced to jazz for the first time, and then Miles Davis is doing Bitches Brew, and Herbie Hancock, and there's so many amazing albums. But I loved that, and that was my original thing. And then when I discovered film music, in college I started playing in the orchestra as getting my percussion degree, and that's it. And also hearing Star Wars for the first time back in 1977. I remember just listening to that score and going, what is that weird sound that sounds like a swamp monster or whatever it is, what is this? And in years, I had to know what it was. So orchestration always fascinated me. So the jazz music went to the back burner, right?
Right.
And I did this whole career as basically kind of a film score type composer doing it for video games. So John Williams, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, Jerry Goldsmith. Oh, and then, all the older composers that
Korngold
that influenced.
Yeah.
Exactly, Korngold. But all those guys drew from the romantic music
tradition,
music from the romantic period.
Behind inspirations, and they keep going back, and everyone's inspired by somebody.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the weird thing, after doing this for so long, I'd gotten super excited about jazz and drums again. I started practicing, doing all sorts of stuff, but people don't normally hire you to, hey, we need a jazz fusion score. And, I've got music I want to do just to get it out there as a separate thing. And I got to think of how I'm going to do that and not freak my fans out going, what happened to Mark Griskey? But on top of that, I also have this concept album that I want to do that's going to be totally epic hybrid, mixing the electronica, because that's the other thing is I love electronic music. So Kraftwerk, Philip Glass even, and it's just you know, I don't know, just anyone who's, there's just so much music. I don't even know where to begin. It's like I could spend the rest. I need 5 lifetimes. I would finish my film scoring career, and then I'd go back and become a jazz drummer for a while, and then come back and do something else. But I would say the improvisational aspect of jazz, in that the harmonies, the melodic richness of jazz, and then the tone painting, so to speak, of the romantic period of classical music.
Right.
Just the rich. There's a visual element. I don't have perfect pitch where I hear a C and C, C blue or something, or like this true connection. But to me, music is visual. Like a certain chord has a certain visual vibe to it, and so the notion of just combining visuals with audio in whatever, just there's so much to learn. Like there's so much to learn still. I feel like I'm just starting, it's like, what can I learn next?
And this actually ties into our very final question, which is, are there any like personal projects that you're working on right now? And I think you went into that a little bit with the concept album. That are you working on anything that your fans should know about, that we should know about, that's coming out?
Yeah, well, I think this concept album might be something that's going to be, a little further down the road once I have my new studio built. But I have it's all in my head, But I think before I get to that, I kind of need to get this jazz stuff out of my system, because it's been a reconnection to playing the piano acoustically and playing my drums and thinking about harmony in a way that's different than the way I normally think about it when I'm being hired to do something.
Oh, yeah.
So I need to get this out of my system. And like I said, all I ask my fans there, if I get this jazz album out, is to realize it's not going to sound like Star Wars.
No, obviously not.
It's just
it's still you.
Something I got to get.
It's still you.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of us, at least, a lot of us listen to your stuff because it's your stuff, essentially. So it doesn't really matter what genre, it's supposed to be in, or, if it's jazz or if it's, orchestral, neoclassical, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's by this guy who had such a tremendous impact, on me, even as a visual artist,
That's wonderful, guys, and right back at you. I'd like, I listened to some of the music on your website, and then, but what I haven't seen is any of your artwork.
Hey,
Mr. Ossifier.
Hey, I'll be. Call me Gab. I'll be very happy to show some of my work, in the future, possibly. Now, I think we actually have that was all the questions that we had. We managed to get through the list. I didn't think that would happen.
We actually had a very, very fruitful discussion.
Very
fruitful, the whole time.
Yes.
I enjoyed speaking with you, gentlemen.
I've been very happy with this conversation. Now, look, Mark, if you want to plug anything, this is your time. We'd be happy to, help. Any projects, any websites that anybody should know about?
Yeah, nothing. I would say, that's the thing. Mark's been hunkering down. He's been a little underground, and there's the variety of things, that there's a few things I can't talk about, unfortunately, right now.
Right.
But I would just, I'm just happy that I've got fans, and people are still, so many years later, into these soundtracks, and I just don't want to let you guys down. I plan on making music until you put me in the ground.
Actually, I did want to bring up something involving that too. Not the putting in the ground, but
a long time from now.
Yeah. So there's a Facebook group. It's called KOTOR Bazak Posting. It's essentially just memes from Knights of the Old Republic. And I let them know that we were going to be speaking to you today, and we basically have like a whole thread of people just saying how much they appreciate your work.
There's hundreds and hundreds of people just waiting to get this interview out there.
Yeah.
Listen to it.
That is so awesome. I'm so happy. And like I said, now that here's the other thing. It's like, I was told, especially when I was on staff with these guys, like, I couldn't do stuff like this. I was literally told not to do podcast. All the, Star Wars is so secretive, right?
Yeah.
NDA is the term.
Non-disclosure agreement. Yeah.
I have signed hundreds of those. So I'm just finally at the age where like, I don't care if they push back and they say, I want to talk about this now. And I'm not saying anything that's going to, I don't think, offend anybody.
It's all these years later, the projects are out there, the companies have changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about it. I'm really happy that you guys reached out to me and we made this happen. And I have had so many weird technical problems. I just think that there's a cosmic shift that's going to happen. I'm just, I just 2022 or something is the time to look to see what Mark's doing next. This is the year for me to tee it up.
Oh yeah. So guys, if you want to keep up with Mark's work, you can follow him on Twitter. He's I believe at Mark Griskey, right?
I believe so too.
Yeah, Mark Griskey. Yes.
I remember.
Okay. So yeah.
Sorry, and my website is just www.griski.com. It's old and moldy and being outdated, but I'm hoping that later this year there's going to be new content, and then I'll finally get a YouTube channel going and all that sort of stuff.
That's fantastic. And again, once more, we would like to help any way we can because, I think your music is beautiful and deserves to be heard by as many people as possible. It deserves to exist and live in the world, and it deserves to have an audience. So definitely.
Thank you so much. This has been a very wonderful conversation.
No problem.
I'm more than happy to do this again when it makes sense down the road. I got some new stuff to talk about, and feel free, both of you or any fans. Really, I'm going to try to just make it. I just want to reach out and talk to my fans more and know what people want and connect with this millennial generation that I'm a very big part of.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
excellent.
Hey, Mark, thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and waste 2 hours with us. I'm sure you had better things to do.
Not even. It was my pleasure. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it again. Hey, guys, that's about it for this episode. If you want to be an absolute lord, you can drop a like or a comment in the comment section below. And I think this is about it. Thank you once again as ever for listening. See you in the next one. Bye.